you're trying to lose belly fat fast, but it feels too slow, you're probably being lied to. See, many influencers promise you rapid results that are unrealistic for most men over 30. I went from 20% body fat down to 6%, and it didn't happen in a 6-week shred. If you follow the wrong advice, you can do everything right and still stay stuck. So I'll show you the brutally honest timeline to lose the stubborn belly fat and exactly what happens at each stage so you know where you are and you don't quit right before it starts working. This first stage can tank motivation because you start eating better, training, doing cardio, and you see the first 10 pounds or 5 kilos drop pretty fast. But when you look in the mirror, your belly still kind of looks the same, which can feel a little bit frustrating. And most men misjudge this process at this point and think of this kind of like peeling an apple. You can peel the first few layers, but it still basically looks the same. The apple has lost some of its mass, but its shape hasn't changed much. But as the apple shrinks, those layers will make a much bigger difference to how it actually looks. This is what is happening at higher body fat levels, above that 25%. Fat is dropping, but it's not quite enough yet to visibly see the change in your chest and your belly. This first stage is more about the setup. It's not like a rapid transformation because you're pulling fat from everywhere in the body, and you usually notice it in the face first, which is why people say,
"Hey, you looking different than you doing this diet," or something like that,
before you notice it yourself. And so this stage can start at any level of body fat, and it brings you down to around that 23 to 26% range. And early on, you can lose up to 1 kilo or even 2 pounds per week, but that rate will not last forever. It will slow down as your body starts to adapt. So your exact timeline depends on where you start. Obviously, a guy starting at 28% body fat is going to move through this phase a little bit sooner than someone starting at 35% body fat. However, a realistic pace is around half a kilo or 1 pound per week on the average from no matter where you're starting. Any faster than that comes with more trade-offs in energy, performance, and long-term sustainability. Let me ask you, would you rather get there in 8 to 12 weeks and then gain it all back, or get there in 8 to 12 months but stay lean for the rest of your life? If you want to estimate your own timeline properly, you can use my calculator, links in the description. The key point is, if you rush this first phase, you're probably going to burn out and never actually get beyond it. And this is exactly why this next stage messes most guys up. This stage, you start to see more physical changes, just not exactly where you want them yet. Typically, this happens as you reach around 20% body fat. Your upper body starts to show more leanness around the shoulders, maybe the arms, pecs, under the pecs, but the belly still looks similar, just maybe a little bit smaller. You might even feel like you look worse, especially if you have more visceral fat that pushes the belly outwards. So people think something must be wrong with their body, be it hormones, insulin, genetics, or metabolism, which all of these can have an impact, but alone, they don't stop fat loss from actually happening. So you can think of this phase as like draining a swimming pool. The shallow end drains first, which is kind of like our limbs and our face and neck. But then the deep end takes longer because that's where most of the water is. And that's kind of like the belly because we store most of our fat around the belly. And fat cells have different receptors that influence how easy they release fat. Beta adrenogenic receptors help stimulate fat release from the cells. So areas like your arms, your upper torso, your legs tend to respond a bit faster, while the alpha-2 receptors slow down that fat release, which is why the belly is a little bit more resistant. So even when you're doing everything right, your belly is usually the last place to fully lean out. Obviously, I could say this 1,000 times and you probably already know it. This is why you cannot spot reduce the fat just here unless you get liposuction. No matter how many ab crunches you do, it's not really going to make a difference. And many guys make the mistake of completely overhauling their diet or their plan, whatever they're doing, cutting more carbs, adding more cardio and workouts, and just going way too extreme too quickly, which often backfires. So in reality, they just needed a little bit more time doing the right things. And this leads us to the next stage where most guys either break through or get stuck and just give up completely. So here's where you break below 20% body fat and into the teens range. By this point, you've lost weight, you're looking leaner overall, but the belly is still holding on for dear life. This is when the game changes because the level of effort that worked in the beginning no longer is going to get you through here. And it's a little bit like turning a screwdriver into wood, but the deeper you go, the more effort you need to finish the job. So getting to that lower body fat percentage works in the same way. The leaner you get, the more consistent and precise you need to be. You cannot guess your food portions anymore. You cannot let your mood dictate your activity and how you feel on the day. And you definitely cannot nuke your progress every weekend. You'll just stay stuck forever. The margin for error tightens up a lot. And fat loss can slow down to like a maximum of half a kilo per week or a maximum of 1 pound per week, or even less than that. Fat that is left now is going to take longer to come off. It's normal. And if you think your plan stopped working, the chances are you're just not being precise enough or patient enough during this stage. One of my clients was thinking that nothing he was doing was working, but then he dropped 5 pounds in 1 week. However, many people out there start overcorrecting by cutting calories too hard and fast, and then, as I said, doing everything way too extreme, trying to force the process. So it's not a surprise when people get sick or they have to travel and they get injured and they fall off and rebound before ever getting to that 15% body fat. But if you are consistent and you adjust and tweak your strategy properly, you will reach this next stage where the journey changes yet again. Remember the apple I was talking about at the start? Well, this is where the shape finally changes. This stage is a pivotal point in your fat loss journey. Most guys want this look, but very few are willing to operate at this level, even temporarily. And this is the 15% body fat milestone. Your waist is tighter, your stomach is flat, you might even start to see some ab outlines and definitely some obliques, and people might even say, you look too thin, you're losing too much weight, because it's no longer normal to be lean, apparently. But now you have an important decision to make. Do you stay here and maintain this lean shape with soft definition, but you're not ripped? You'll have more flexibility with food, less precision to worry about, and it's easier to live a little bit more laxly. But you also carry the risk of quickly drifting back up to that 18-20% body fat mark if you fall off the wagon. This point is a big achievement, but it can kind of feel like you've baked the cake without putting the icing on. Second option is, do you decide to double down and push to that final phase to actually get ripped? That top 1% physique, because getting from 15% down to that 10 to 13 isn't that far away, but it's also not playing on easy mode like in stage 1. The process demands more detail, more patience. There's no magic to it, but it does expose just how committed and consistent you really are. The timeline matters far less here. Every percent you drop is earned and it's going to be noticeable to you. Also, you may feel hunger that you haven't experienced before. So if you program this stage incorrectly, your energy will tank, training might start to shift backwards, and recovery is going to suffer, especially if your life is busy and stressful. So rushing this phase is a bad idea, especially for men who are over 30 working full time with families. But if you structure it properly, you can still perform at a higher level. And I'm not trying to deter you. I'm actually trying to encourage you. I'm just being realistic about it. Anyone can do this using the correct method. Because when I was working 50 hours plus a week and dieting down to that 10% mark to eventually compete in bodybuilding, I was still hitting PRs every single week in the gym, and the hunger was very noticeable, but it was tolerable. There's nothing special about that or me. It just comes down to the strategy and the execution. And sure, a little bit of David Goggins energy is going to help.
That internal voice I put on tape sounds like a straight when I listen to that. So if you ever have a hard time out there, tape yourself. Listen to what kind of bitch you're being. Stay hard.
That makes the result far more rewarding. If you had it instantly overnight, you wouldn't value it. So like I said, this stage either makes guys stop and fall back into the hole that they tried to climb out of, but there is a final stage that, in my opinion, truly separates the guys who get and stay lean and the ones who keep repeating the same yo-yo cycles for eternity. This stage is going from lean to proper ripped. If you got the 15% body fat the right way, you do not need to reinvent anything to get to the next phase. calories stay controlled, your steps stay consistent, and training has to stay progressive. At most, you make some fine tuning if there is any metabolic adaptations, which you would know if you're tracking your data properly. However, this is also where a short diet break can help before pushing into this stage to get down to that 10 to 12% body fat mark. All I'm saying is, 1 to 2 weeks max at your maintenance to reset mentally and physically at the 15% mark. But only if it is controlled. This is not a blowout week, otherwise everything will just fall apart. If you lose control here, you can easily undo weeks of effort quicker than you think. Progress at this point does get a little bit slower. Somewhere between a quarter to half a kilo per week or half to 1 pound per week max. And you're already leaner than the majority of men, so it's really just you versus you at this point. But you're gonna notice something bigger that starts to shift. The thing is, anyone can push hard temporarily, get down to 15%. But getting to that 10 to 12% and maintaining it makes you into someone different. You are no longer the guy chasing fat loss. You become the guy who is lean and lives that way. This is where your identity shifts, habits, your structure change, and this is why I believe every man should get ripped just once in his life. Not just for the looks, but for what it's going to teach you about not just yourself, but your body and your mind. Also, if you reach and maintain that 10 to 30% body fat, you are far less likely to ever end up back where you started, because once you've done it properly, you'll realize that you're not waking up wishing it was easier or faster than it actually is. You just do what is required for the result that you want. No hoping, no praying, no wishing. Then from there, the best part can begin. A reverse phase to cruise up to a new sustainable 11 to 13% range, which I've maintained for like 10 years, where you still look sharp, you can perform optimally, hit PRs in the gym, and actually enjoy your life with a bigger buffer away from the overweight range in the 20% plus. But that's a topic for another video. Getting to 20%, then to 15%, then to 10 to 13% is a process I build and support for my one-on-one clients. It is a structured system to make fat loss and muscle growth predictable and sustainable, high-performing men with busy lifestyles. Spots are limited due to the one-on-one approach, so if you're serious about doing this properly, check the link below the video to get more details on that. If you feel like you're doing all the right things but you're not seeing the results yet, watch this video next because it will show you how to recognize progress before it shows up in the mirror.